Welcome to the Big Suey, presented by DraftKings.
Why are you listening to this show?
The podcast that seems very similar to the other Dan Le Batard podcast.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologize for that.
In fact, the only difference seems to be this imaging.
I have been tempted in restaurants just walking past tables to grab somebody's fries that if they're just there. That hasn't happened to you guys?
I've done it.
And now, here's the marching man to nowhere, Fat Face, and the habitual liar.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Meadowlarkers 42. I am Howard Bryant. This is Amin El Hassan. However, we're missing one. We're missing Kate Fagan. And so, but 2 out of 3 isn't bad. Does that qualify as a quorum?
Yeah, it does.
It kind of does, right? We get 2/3. And Woody's here. Woody's here, so that's actually 75%. It's 3 out of 4.
Yeah.
This is an interesting week because of 2 things I didn't even know about. I had not heard until a couple of days ago that Major League Baseball had made the decision not to have Sunday games in the World Series, a complete and total surrender to the National Football League, to the Juggernaut that is the NFL. I think we should probably title this one The Juggernaut, right? What would the name of it be?
That's a pretty good one.
Right. And so, and on top of that, on top of baseball making this decision that the game's only been around since the Civil War and they're not going to play a World Series game on a Sunday, there's that. And then on top of that, you've got the NBA making a couple of decisions as well that it doesn't want to compete with the machine that is the National Football League. What is it? I mean, they said that they are not playing. There's no games on Thanksgiving.
No games on Thanksgiving, but the NBA has always kind of stayed away from Thanksgiving. The big days are the Wednesday and the Friday, and then they just concede that Thursday.
And they will own Christmas with a triple header.
Well, until the NFL said, I like
Christmas,
that too.
We like Christmas too. Everybody, who doesn't like Christmas? Let's take Christmas. The NFL takes Christmas. So in general, what we've got here is just the overarching look is the National Football League is a monster. It is the juggernaut. It is the machine. And for years, there has been a certain level of coexistence with the other leagues. Back in the old days, the Major League Baseball owned October because of the World Series, and football didn't really compete a lot with baseball out of courtesy. And that part of it is gone. There were parts of the schedule that belonged to baseball even during football season. Hot stove leagues, remember, in the off season, people would talk about the winter meetings. So baseball still had a presence. Obviously, the NBA on Christmas, that's their day. Famous games. They market their season around what's the Christmas game going to be when the season comes out. And yet all of it feels like they're just living on borrowed time for whenever the NFL decides to flex.
It's whenever they want to, whenever they got it, whenever they get an inkling of desire towards a day of the week, right? You think about Sunday, you say NFL, you're talking about a company that owns a day of the week. Right?
Exactly. We already have a day of the week.
Man, and then they were like, we'll do Mondays too. You know what? Can I get a little Thursday action in there? Every once in a while, let me get a Saturday as well. And now, the latest is, you know what? Christmas. I know Christmas falls on a Sunday this year, and that's why. But it's staggering. And so, one of the things I wanted to look at was the ratings for the NFL games that coincided with the World Series games last year, right? And you'll be excited to know this. So this is October 31st, is a Sunday. And the ratings for the World Series, Game 5, a game that saw the Houston Astros defeat the Atlanta Braves 9-5, it drew a 5.3, which is about basically around 10 million some odd viewers. That same week, with viewership going down, the NFL drew a 12-2, 22.87 million viewers.
Yeah. In other words,
for week 5, by the way, just Just in case anyone was under the impression that maybe it was perhaps, this is like a huge.
So this is a hammer and nail situation. One is the lawnmower and one is the lawn.
Yes.
But what's interesting about this, too, when you think about just the power of the NFL, and we've been talking about this for years, the power of the NFL. And there's so many different ways to look at it. One, in terms of how much of the NFL is just the power of the NFL itself, and how much of it is simply the comfort of this is a sport that has perfected what it does. It was always built to be watched at home. Mm-hmm. It was always built for gambling. Mm-hmm. It was always built for the creature comforts of having people come over. It's a very social sport to watch. Come on over, watch the game, right? It's very different than the other sports in a lot of ways. And so now, as television has essentially become the superpower over the last half century, you look at some of these decisions and the reaction from baseball making this decision. A lot of people have said, well, yeah, if you're getting swamped on Sundays, why would you play your games on Sunday? Shouldn't you simply adjust to the reality of it? I talked to a couple of baseball people over the last 48 hours, and they were telling me that this is a white flag, that this is another example of just poor leadership, that you don't know how to market your sport. You don't know how to go and play to your strengths. You've never played to your strengths, and now you're complaining or upset that the NFL is just going to run a tidal wave all over you.
Is it that? How do I know that's what your contacts have said?
Well, my instincts. Go ahead.
Yeah, to me, it don't matter how baseball markets itself, or basketball, or soccer, or the Oscars, or whatever.
There's nothing you can do against the NFL.
Nothing you can do. What you said is funny. Woody and I had a conversation the other day in the kitchen over at the studio, and we were talking about how Woody was telling me about how EPL clubs look at the NFL like they've got it figured out. And I said, yes, they do, because as you said, Howard, the entire sport, if in a weird, freakish Darwinian evolution, was geared for consumption. Not about like the purity of the sport or any of that shit. Like we have 1 million timeouts and a 2-minute break, 2-minute drill and all that stuff, and halftime, and we're selling everything. People are able to go,
including our championship, which is the Super Bowl. The game doesn't even come first. The Super Bowl is all about the advertisers and about the spectacle of either being there or watching it.
Right. So the Super Bowl, beyond the ads, we're going to have, we're going to have an entire week of just celebration, parties and sponsors and all sorts of things, right? The ease of gambling, the number of different things you can gamble on in a football game. And then you throw on top of it the very real primordial desire of human beings to watch other human beings perish, hit each other, combat, right? All of these things. It's like it was created in the lab, ladies and gentlemen. And so for baseball, with its, 100 pitch counts and 3-hour games and kind of guys.
I'll take a 3-hour game. You mean 4.5? Playoff games are 420.
Right. So all of these things don't portend themselves towards being the same kind of TV spectacle. And even if you said, for an instance, okay, we're going to do away with all the baseball prudes and we're going to do whatever it takes, snip, snip here, adjustment there. What can you do, Howard? I don't know. And this is not an indictment of the sport. To me, it's just like, that's life.
Well, and especially when you're looking at the history of the sport. One of my favorite things about book writing is the research. I love research. I'm a total research nerd. Love hopping in on microfilm. Love going back into the day. One of my favorite things about research is not even what you're researching. It's everything else. It's like when you hop on to the microfilm and you look at the front page of the Boston Traveler in 1801 or 1901, you're looking at how, what the weather was that day or what the main story is and why are there no photos? Oh, that's right. They didn't really do photos in 1901 that much. All of those different things. And one of the things that you will always find, regardless, no matter what, whether you're looking at the newspapers from the late 1800s, whether you're looking at the newspapers from the 1930s, whether you're looking at the sporting news from 1955 or yesterday, the game needs to be sped up. I mean, they're talking about this. They were talking about baseball being too slow in 1890, and the game was like 75 minutes long.
No way.
Exactly. So it doesn't matter. There's Stan Musial in 1957, I think, is talking about how baseball's got to be sped up because the average game is an hour and 47 minutes. It's never been fast enough. So when you're talking about people, and this is pre-real television. This is back when the teams and the leagues themselves didn't even want you to watch the game on TV. They prevented you from watching the game on TV because they were convinced that if you watched it on TV, you weren't going to go to the ballpark.
Right.
So imagine a sport, football, which is made for television, against a sport, baseball, that is completely not made for television. Baseball is only great, really, in a lot of ways, when you're there. Right. It's a social game where you're keeping score and you're talking to the person next to you. And I've always said that one of my favorite things about baseball is sometimes not even calling it a sport, in that baseball is it's the only sport where you can actually eat while you're playing. Can you imagine running down on the fast break with tobacco in your mouth, right? Or you got a mouthful of sunflower seeds and you're actually trying to play football, you choke to death. But baseball moves at a certain speed where it's not really geared toward combat, let's put it that way. So one sport has always had to deal with trying to create a certain level of appeal to the people who are watching it, and the other one is essentially made for you to sit on your couch.
Right.
So I get your point. The question is if you're a baseball and you're recognizing the numbers show that we can't beat them on a Sunday. Not only can we not beat them, we can't come close to beating them. They're in week 6. We're in our most important games.
We're doing half.
And we're doing less than half.
Oh, man.
Is this the smart business move to just say, hey, we're going to capitulate on this?
I don't see any other way. And again, by the way, basketball, albeit our most important games are not played during football season, but we still have an element of competition. And this Christmas is going to be a hell of a case study of having our 5 games against their 3 games. And by the way, teams from the local markets are double dipping. So you got Green Bay at Miami. Well, the Bucks play on Christmas Day. You got Broncos at Rams. Well, we got the Nuggets and the Lakers playing on Christmas Day. And then you've got the evening game is Tampa Bay versus Arizona. You've got the Suns playing.
And those are important games because it's December for football. Those games are going to have playoff implications for at least some of them.
Absolutely. So what we're witnessing is a competition, not only in general over the national audiences, but for the local audiences even. If you're a Suns fan, am I watching the Cardinals game or am I watching Suns Nuggets?
Let me throw a quick question out at you. Like, there used to be a certain level of gentleman's agreement that we all, if you're of a certain generation that we grew up with, right? Baseball, they play day game series. Mm-hmm. Friday night, Saturday day, Sunday day. This is back in the day. Now they try to do whatever they want. They play everything as a night game. Right. Saturdays were college football. Sundays were NFL football. Mondays were Monday night football and Monday night baseball. Mm-hmm. They used to do both.
Right.
And obviously with different parts of the year, they didn't compete with each other necessarily, except in September. But generally, Monday night baseball was this Monday game. Mm-hmm. Then I remember in 98, my first year on the beat, covering the A's for the San Jose Mercury News. And I'm noticing the schedule. And obviously the schedule in the Bay Area is very different because both of those teams, the Giants and the A's, used to play day games. They had Wednesday afternoon day games, Thursday 12:15 games. It's not like the Cubs where they didn't have lights, or even after they got lights, they still play a majority of day games. But the schedule was pretty much the same, which was baseball was still primarily a night game by that point, but you still had plenty of day games to be played, especially on the weekends. Then around 98, and part of the reason was the Fox TV deal, but the other reason was the post-strike, the money just kept getting bigger and bigger in the TV contracts. It was like, look, we need to make more money. Spring training became a revenue stream. Instead of a place where you went down and sort of hung out and you had free access to everybody and everybody was really chill, suddenly going to a Cubs, Red Sox, or Yankees spring training game felt like a regular season game. Because now spring training has to be a moneymaker. Yeah. And I remember talking to was it Larry Bear? I remember Walt Jocketty. I was talking to one of the executives I think it was Walt actually, and he said to me, "We're at a point now where the salaries are so high that we are no longer in gentleman's agreement with the other sports. We are after every entertainment dollar that this country has." Because what I had noticed, and I was like, well, wait a minute, why is there a Saturday night game? When Saturday games used to be played at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Bud Selig about this, and he said to me too that we're in a position right now where Saturday nights we're not competing with other baseball fans. We're competing with the guy who wants to take his girlfriend to the movies,
yep,
or to the bowling alley,
yep,
and we want them to come to a baseball game now. So we can't have a game at 1 o'clock anymore because that's not date time. We're looking to be part of date night. And I remember thinking, is this sustainable? I mean, what does it do to a game? Number one, baseball is a sport that to me is meant to be played in the daytime. It's not a daytime sport anymore, all because of this. So you're thinking about the number of financial decisions that are being made that are actually affecting the style of play itself. And now when you add the NFL piece to it, which is we can't even compete. We were going after the TV dollar, and now we can't even compete for the TV dollar with these guys?
And that's what I want. That's what I was going to point out. It's the gentleman's agreement protected everybody from football. The moment you say we're going after Saturday night date night, the NFL says, "Oh, we could go after." Exactly. It's like the fish that's about to eat the smaller fish and doesn't realize behind it is this orca. It's like this killer whale about to just devour it. I mean, that's the terror that everyone finds themselves in, right? But I guess let me ask you this question, Howard. What if we flip the conversation? The NFL was a Sunday, Monday proposition. Then they added Thursday night games. And now there's a part in the schedule where they go to Saturday. And they've added a 17th game to the schedule. Is there a saturation point? Is there a point where it's too much football?
Glad you brought that up because I had been of the mind of two things. Number one, at some point, isn't the NFL going to try to make the ultimate power move and try to play football every day? Like, aren't they at some point one day going to try to have a Wednesday game? Even though it messes up the entire schedule and what these guys are doing to their bodies and everything else, because you've already got. I said, are they going to play Friday night football? Mm-hmm. And that was the other piece we didn't even bring up. Fridays were for the high schools, so right. You had right. So this was the gentleman's agreement across the board. I had thought at some point that you had to have some form of law of diminishing returns, that you can't play every day, that you lose the specialness of it. For example, I remember in 2010. When the Giants won the World Series, first time in San Francisco that the Giants had won the World Series, I wanted to take a step back and I wanted to write a really nice, long appreciation of this season for what this meant for all of those long-suffering Giants fans who had been there since '58, whose parents had been there. Like, not that different from the Red Sox winning or the White Sox winning. It's been a long time. And my editor at ESPN, Dave Cool, was like, okay, great, but you've got like 2 days to write it. I'm like, 2 days? The World Series just ended. And he's like, yeah, but we're starting to move into the free agent cycle. And I said, the Giants just won the World Series. Nobody cares about that piece of it. They will wait. I said, believe me, Dave, if I take a week and a half or so to write this story, by the end of next week, Giants fans are going to want to read this. They are savoring a championship.
Right.
And he said, no. The world is moving so fast now, and people have moved on to so many things that they forget everything. And I was thinking, where is the fun in that? And I was thinking, I don't even know if I believe this. I said, if you can tell me with a straight face that a fan base that had been waiting since 1958 to win the World Series is only going to celebrate it for 4 days, I'd say that you're insane. And if you're not insane, then we've all completely lost the plot. My point here is I thought that the speed of this was eventually going to doom all the sports, that there is no off season anymore. Like, we've all heard that. Like, when you cover a New York team, there's no off season. And I'm like, well, when do you get to savor anything? And we've seen that the NBA season has gone on so long now that you're like, oh, by the way, training camp is in 86 days. The season just ended. The Warriors just won a championship. And you're talking about training camp? I believed that at some point, wasn't this going to devour football as well? That at some point, all of this becomes none of this. But it really hasn't happened. And the reason it hasn't happened, I think, is because football is the ultimate home sport. We're spending more time in our houses. And it's the ultimate TV sport. And also, when you talk about that bloodlust of people like watching 22 guys smash into each other, there's something inherent about that doesn't make it necessarily bulletproof, but makes it really, really hard. And it makes it really, really hard to disrupt. And then the other piece of that was I was also of the mind that the NFL was going to finally struggle. Oh, and there's your Bleacher Report breaking news that LeBron just signed a $97.1 million extension. It just came across my screen, so what could I say? Maybe I'm late to it. And I always thought that the ultimate TV sport, that Best Buy and all these big box stores are selling you 65 and 70-inch televisions for the big game, right? They sell these TVs for Super Bowl weekend. That all of that was going to be adversely affected by streaming, by people watching on smaller devices. That because of the style in which people consumed information was really going to affect the rhythms of this sport. And it hasn't.
It's everything proof, right? It's recession proof. It's cord cutting proof. It's it's protest proof. Yeah, it's protest proof. It survives everything, and it's scandal proof. I mean, as we're recording this, the news this week also of the settlement where they were not the Watson settlement. Wow, see, that's the problem. This just highlights it right here.
Yeah, we can't even decide which scandal we're talking about.
Scandal I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about one, and Howard's bringing up another. The fact that they can survive multiple of these at a time and everyone's all right with it. No, I was talking about the race norming.
Oh, that's right. That's the race norming thing I was going to say. And let's not forget the Daniel Snyder thing going on in Washington also.
Like, these are three major things. One where like their players are being destroyed and they wanted to cheap out on paying them what they're due for destroying their brains. That's one. You got a quarterback who's accused of gross sexual misconduct, and you've got an owner who has is being investigated by Congress about a toxic sexual harassment workplace, right? None of this is even taking a mile an hour off of their velocity. They are skyrocketing past all this. Nobody cares.
Well, and they're skyrocketing for a couple of other reasons. One, because of the actual appeal of the game. But there's another reason, too. And that is, let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that all of these sports teams, these sports leagues, they have political action committees. Mm-hmm. And they have lobbyists and lawyers in Washington right now who are feverishly trying to work every politician in America to give them favorable business terms. And the push and push and push, and finally the dam broke on gambling, that now with the DraftKings and everybody else and Bally's and Caesars and the rest of it in control, that just makes football even more appealing.
Right.
And I remember one baseball executive told me one day, there was a meeting at the commissioner's office, and they had done this flow chart of what was going to happen once New Jersey approved the sports legalized gambling. That once Vegas, no matter, or Nevada had the monopoly on the thing, and they were talking billions of dollars, and it was essentially the scene out of The Godfather. Well, now we've got the unions, and we've got we've got the gambling, and but eventually the families are going to be able to buy more police protection, so we got to get into the cocaine game. We got to get into the drug game. There's a lot of money in that white powder, the late great James Caan said. And they were talking about this. This is going to open the floodgates, and if we're not in on it, we're going to get devoured. We have to get in on this. And you can see right now, gambling is such a huge piece of this. It was always a huge piece of it. But now, this is the reason why Roger Goodell a few years ago said, we are projecting our revenues to be $25 billion by 2025 or 2030, whatever year he said.
It sounds like a conservative estimate now.
And exactly, now it sounds like you lowballed yourself.
Yeah.
But yes, to your original question, isn't this supposed to at some point dry up? I sort of thought it would. I used to think that at some point, and of course when you had the Kaepernick stuff, you had people on both sides saying, I'm never watching a football game. If he plays, I'm never watching the NFL again. If he doesn't play, I'm never watching the NFL again. And yet the numbers say that people are watching the NFL. And I get it. I get it in some ways because this is your entertainment. The world is hard. Life is hard. Living is hard. You come home and you want to crack open a beer and have, roll out the nachos and the wings, and you just want to watch some football, right? And do nothing on your Sunday.
Isn't it weird of all the things that are like everything is struggling in this new era by the counting, right? By the metrics, everything is struggling. Nothing does well anymore. I was looking at like what the most watched program in 1998 was. And I think it was like the Seinfeld finale. 70 million people watched it. It's a number that doesn't even make sense now. What do you mean? What do you mean 70 million people sat down and watched something? A third of the popular, a quarter of the country sat down and watched a program at the same time for 30 minutes? It's bizarre. So TV and movies and music and basketball and tennis and every single form of entertainment has bowed its head and say, I can't keep up with
now
this
have
out.
to adjust. And it changes in the coverage as well. I mean,
but the NFL somehow is like, no,
because they have Sunday. They've got Sunday, right? No other sport has Sunday. I mean, and also I was talking to Bomani about this one day about fame. And Whitty just tells us that 1.8 million watched the Better Call Saul finale.
And that's a great number now. In 1998,
as an aside, I just want to say to Whitty on that text message, love the fact that you wrote Better Call Saul and spelled call Caul. Love that right there. Nice. No, I mean, and it's true. Like I was talking to Bomani, our man Bomani Jones, about this not too long ago, about fame, about the commonality of fame, of how back when I was a kid, you had 3 networks, man. You had 3 networks, some UHF and PBS. So the bar to crack, if you got on Johnny Carson, the whole country was watching you. Like everybody was watching. The level to crack that now today with 300 gazillion channels, there are people who are super famous and I've never heard of them. And so if you're the NFL, you still have that one thing. You've got Sunday. And so to baseball, I just wish baseball would do a couple of other things. I'm not saying that that there's some magic fix for them to suddenly become relevant in against the NFL. I'm not saying that. But here's the thing that I would like baseball to do.
Right.
I would like baseball to at least go back to some of its roots. You haven't had a day game in the World Series since 1987. You start your games at 8 o'clock or 8:20, and they go on for 4 hours. You got to create something that's going to get eyeballs on and get some young people to look at the sport. How about a day game World Series? Is that too much to ask?
Well, let me push back, because a lot of the things that sometimes make sense actually don't have the financials to back it up. So I'll give you a great example, right? In the research that Whitty provided for us before the show is an article from a couple of years ago, I believe it was 2020, where an exec with the Atlanta Hawks, Steve Koonin, said the NBA should explore moving the season to always start in December and end in July or August or whatever, in order to avoid football, basically. You, in essence, just move your calendar over, 2.5 months later. And the problem with that was they've done the math. The ratings and by the way, and the bubble confirmed the math, which is people don't watch TV in the summertime. Not like
they're on
they
vacation.
do. They're on vacation. They're out and about. They're doing outdoorsy things. And that's kind of why baseball traditionally has flourished, because, like you said, baseball is not a TV thing. Baseball is like go outside and I go to the ballpark. It's a spectator, in-person spectator sport. So while, yes, I returning to roots, having a daytime World Series game or games sounds great. I imagine that they probably did the math that says everyone's at work. We're going to, like, as bad as it is now, it gets worse.
How about an afternoon World Series game on a Saturday? How about on a Saturday or a Sunday? And how about this? Okay, well, maybe you're not going to be able to compete with NBC Sunday Night Football, but you can't compete at 1 o'clock? And by the way, I love that you brought this up about the calendar shifting, and I wanted to shift gears in a second and move to specifically, we've been talking baseball, let's go to basketball. But before we do that, I do want to say it is interesting, like when you're on the West Coast, one of the things that everybody talks about over there, especially LA, not so much, but absolutely in the Bay, East Coast bias. You hear it all the time. East Coast bias. It's East Coast bias. And it is East Coast bias, and here's the reason why. When you're a kid growing up on the East Coast and you're watching the news or you see it on the internet, wherever you get your information, and in late January, early February, you see those trucks going down to spring training, down to Florida, that tells you winter's almost over. And that makes you feel like it's almost baseball season. And from a calendar standpoint, from a cyclical standpoint, people start thinking about baseball because they're thinking about warm weather and getting out of the house. Now, when you go to the West Coast, nobody cares. It's always nice out there. So when I would get out there, and when I was living in San Francisco, you look outside, people are windsurfing, people are out there hiking, they're doing all these things. And it was like, yeah, this is sort of difficult to compete with.
We talk about that a lot. Like when people say we're the best fan bases, they say, "Oh, Cleveland, those are real fans, right? Of any sport. Chicago, those are real fans, and Philadelphia, those are real fans." And unlike those LA fans, fair weather fans, and
other stuff to do.
There's other stuff to do, baby. I'm not locked in all year long like you guys are. Just awful.
I am not sitting in the house at 1 o'clock on a Saturday when it's 71 degrees outside. It's nice outside. There's other stuff. And that's the other reason to me as well, when people are like, well, how come we don't have that rabid fan base like Boston? You don't want that rabid fan base. There's other stuff happening.
Because our fan base has a life.
They have a life, right?
You know what the other part of it, though, Howard, is, and this is a very real thing. The other part of the East Coast bias is everyone's asleep by the time the West Coast games comes.
That's right. We didn't see you play.
Right. So, like, the Warriors are the best thing since sliced bread, and, like, 70% of the countries in the Eastern time zone by population? They're all missing it because
you missed the show.
This game starts at 10:30, right?
That's right. And that was the other thing. Like when you're a kid watching, they're on the West Coast swing. Your game starts at 10:30.
Yep.
And so you're trying to stay awake or whatever. And that was like one of the things that I had to get used to when I moved to California was the 10 a.m. football game Sunday morning.
Oh, I love it. I was like,
you know what? You could watch the Sunday night game and still go out to dinner.
Yep.
You could watch football, but when I was living out there, you could go all day. 10 a.m. Bloody Mary, drinking all the way through. 8:30, let's go out and get some dinner. And you saw all the games.
In bed before midnight.
And still be in bed before midnight. Let's go to basketball. And the reason, so we've talked about baseball, and baseball being what it is, everyone always likes to complain about baseball. But basketball is a different animal. Basketball is the hip sport. Basketball is the Madison Avenue sport. Basketball is the sport that sells the sneakers. Basketball is the birth of the cool. Basketball is also the European game as well. And the Chinese game. It's got all the international appeals. And it is trying to avoid football as well. What does that tell you?
It tells, again, that's why I go back to what you said with your baseball friends. I feel like they're unfairly targeting. It's like, it's baseball's fault. Like, no, man, it's kind of like this. Everyone's going through it. And basketball is no stranger. And there is a very real conversation about whether the NBA has turned off vast portions of the fan base with what some might call political leanings, right?
Well, and I can stop you right there, and then you can go and go on when I'm done with this. The NBA just announced the other day that they won't be having games on Election Day,
right,
to encourage citizenship.
There is a level of kind of disdain that a portion of this country holds. This is not like you talk about that. That's a great example, Howard, because there's nothing partisan about that. There's no sides. Hey, guys, let's not have games on election night so that everyone, including our own players and employees, having a chance to participate in this grand experiment we call democracy, right? I guarantee you, there is a sizable portion that's like, who the hell are you to tell me what to do at my Tuesday night?
I want a game. Well, because it's anti-blackness. They can't stand the fact that these black athletes, it's an 80% black league, there's no reason to dance around it, that they are taking a level of agency and control and suggestion. And people don't like that. And also because the assumption, when you're thinking about LeBron and you're thinking about the WNBA and you're thinking about all the different protests and everything else, the assumption is that you may say that you are clearing the calendar for everybody, but you're really clearing the calendar for your political point of view. Right. And, you can look at it that way if you want. It's kind of dumb to look at it that way because anybody can vote in whatever way they want. And who knows who's doing all the voting in those locker rooms. And you could make an argument that a lot of those players aren't voting at all, maybe, right? It all depends. Right. But it goes back to the double standard of the having it both ways that people really want, which is they say they want their athletes to be present. They say they want them to be sincere and authentic. And then when they get sincerity and authenticity, they're like, yeah, you need to be quiet. Yeah, I'm going to need you to be quiet right now.
Not that kind of sincerity.
Not that much sincerity. But if you're the NBA, don't you say, and maybe this is not as pronounced as baseball because baseball is really talking about the World Series. This is our championship, and we can't compete with Week 5. If you're the NBA, do you sort of just brush it off a little bit because you're like, okay, even Christmas, all right, we're going to see what we can do head-to-head with the NFL on Christmas, but we're still only 22 games into the season or 25 games into the season. We still got 50 games left. We got 55 games left. So how dire do you feel, or is there at all an NFL existential threat to the NBA?
Not as great, right? Because as you mentioned, the least important part of the schedule is the part that shares a calendar with the NFL. But Christmas is important because ABC, Disney pays a lot of money for the rights to those games, right? And so diminishing ratings on Christmas Day represent a very clear and present danger to the NBA's bottom line when it comes down to that. I remember the year after the bubble, some people were saying, hey, the NBA should start on Christmas Day. First of all, there were people saying, no, they should start on MLK Day. And
which is January.
This is January, right? And
That the NBA season should start on MLK Day?
that first season after the bubble.
The first season after the bubble, yes.
In order to give a maximum kind of off season there for players that gone pedal to the metal.
Yeah, so players can reset.
And the NBA was like, because Turner pays a lot of money, not only to have MLK Day, but they pay a lot of money to have opening night, right? The opening night games always go on Turner. So in essence, if you started the season on MLK Day, you've taken one of the tentpole signature big money items for Turner and mashed it with another one of their big money item tentpole nights in MLK Day, because they have MLK Day. Similarly, ESPN Disney is going to say, wait a second, you're not going to take Christmas away from me. So it's like, okay, so we have to include Christmas. All right, let's start Christmas. Turner says the same thing. Wait a second, you took away my opening
Christmas
night.
You're wiping out two dates. Because you're combining opening night and Christmas. You need both of those to be separate.
Well, yeah, I mean, but from Disney's standpoint, they're like, yeah, let's do that. Because now we get something we didn't pay for.
That's right.
Turner says absolutely not. So that's why we started like the Tuesday before Christmas, because everyone wants their money's worth. So when we say, hey, Saturday, what does it matter if the NFL whoops our ass on Christmas Day? Two things matter. Number one is our current partners and our prospective partners are looking at this as a diminished property. And number two, if the ass whooping is as sound as I believe it will be, guess what we're getting in the next couple of years? NFL Christmas.
That's right. Well, and that's a big deal, and it'll be interesting to see what happens on Christmas Day. I actually think that the NBA, and when we're talking about baseball as well, the baseball date night strategy, and which is one of the biggest reasons, by the way, why you no longer get those weekday games in baseball. Now, I got it in Houston and in Dallas. Atlanta, they always played Saturday night games, and they did so because it was so damn hot. Mm-hmm. You don't want to play a day. Who wants to play a day game? Right. Although Houston's indoors, but still, right? Arizona, you're not playing. Who's going to go out there in mid-July and watch a 1:00 game with the Diamondbacks playing the Colorado Rockies? Nobody wants a piece of that, right?
I did that, but it was Star Wars night. That's what.
I mean, so you got to have a 7:00 game because it's only 110 at 7:00 at night, right? You got to have that. Although they play indoors too if they want, but basketball, the NBA pretty much did the same thing as baseball in the late 90s. Not that they were always playing 1:00 night games, but they used to play day games in the afternoon too.
Playoff games specifically
as well. But now they've gone date night as well. Everybody is going after all of the entertainment dollars.
The conference finals in the NBA, both East and West, have 9 p.m. Eastern start times, and the NBA Finals 9 p.m. Eastern start time, every single game.
Remember game one of the finals in '84, the Celtics and the Lakers? That was a 1:00 game.
Yep,
game one.
The earliest you'll see is if it's on a Sunday, they'll give us an hour. So it'll start at 8 p.m. Eastern.
I mean, do I have this right? I think not 85, because the very next year the Celtics killed the Lakers, and that was an afternoon game.
Yep.
87 was the first year where all the games were primetime, if I'm not mistaken.
Ooh, I'm like, I
think
the finals.
I think where all the finals went primetime.
I might be losing my mind right now, but I seem to remember in the 90s, some not a lot, but at least one matinee game in the NBA Finals.
Actually, I think you're right. I'm thinking 93. Wasn't Game 6 an afternoon game? Phoenix. Phoenix and the Bulls.
With the Paxson shot, right?
That's right, because I remember I was at a bar watching that. I don't think it was midnight. My point is that they've all gone for the maximum entertainment dollar. Goodbye, gentlemen's agreement. Friday Night Lights, so be it. Hey, we're competing with you. Saturday football, Big Ten football, we're competing with you. Sunday NFL, we're taking whatever we can take. And basketball has been really successful, especially in the places where it's important to be seen. Miami, Atlanta, LA, New York. Those places have become a destination where people who aren't even really super fans or whatever, they go because because the game is the hip happening place to be.
Man, they used to have, it's funny, Basketball Reference it'll have times on box scores for some games, and I think this might be just a little too early for it. But I'm almost positive, man.
No, I think you're right. It might have been a little bit later, but I remember going all of a sudden NBA Finals, and one of the reasons why I remember this is because Don Fear, the old executive director of the Players Association in baseball, who's now with the National Hockey League Players Association, he brought up when we were talking about why the game's going on so long and why are they so late. And he was like, nobody complains that the NCAA Finals, March Madness, that game starts at 9 o'clock. Nobody complains that the NBA Finals are all in prime time. Why are you mad at baseball? And I was like, because those games are timed and this game isn't timed. And also it's a heck of a lot faster. But Woody brings up a good point as well on the chat. On a bigger level, he says, football mounted a challenge and overtook baseball. Will anybody mount a challenge to football in our lifetimes? Although, I don't know, who knows? Woody, you got a lot more time on this planet than I do. So, yeah, it's a great question, and I think we're looking at, if I'm not mistaken, late 60s is when football began to overtake baseball.
Really?
Yeah, it was a late 60. I think it was 1960, which is one of the reasons why baseball brought in the designated hitter. They were like, look, we got to do something here. We need to increase the offense. And remember the year of the pitcher, 1968, guys were scoring, teams were scoring 2 runs a game, and football, NFL merger comes. And so you're looking at, it's been over 50 years since football has been the dominant sport.
I don't know that we can find or manufacture the monster that's going to take down King Kong. I don't know, because how much more TV friendly could you make a sport? If you were starting from scratch, Howard, you can make any sport any way you want. And I told you to make this as TV friendly a product, as gambling friendly a product, et cetera, et cetera. You come up with football. And so we know that they have that market cornered at the very least, right? They've got the best of that. Like, Witty's asking what could overtake football. Like, it would have to be the live golf of football, because they already have the formula. You're not going to perfect their formula. All you can do is say, all right, now give me all your big names. Now I've got them. I'm paying for them. That's the only thing.
Well, you've created a demand over the course of half a century. Mm-hmm. Once again, I mean, the Albert Brooks line in Concussion is one of the great lines in movie history. You're going after a business that owns a day of the week, right? Yeah. They actually literally have owned a day of the week in all of our lifetimes.
And they took that from the church.
And they took that, exactly, right? I mean, remember, baseball needed a permit to play baseball on Sundays because of the church. They had to actually apply to play baseball, and then that all changed with television. There's no other sport that is better suited for our lifestyles than football. I mean, that's one of the reasons why football has been so powerful.
And that's why I go back to is football going to, where is the saturation point? Where is the point where football devours itself?
I thought it was in concussions, and I thought it was on the violence, and I thought it was going to be, I really did believe that. I thought that at some point, someone's going to die on the field.
Yeah.
Right? And I really did think that was going to affect.
It was going to horrify everyone.
Well, horrify people, and also just get them to sort of recalibrate, especially especially as we get more information. But here's where I knew I was dead wrong. The rise of MMA. I remember when mixed martial arts and UFC started to rise, because I was a big boxing fan. I loved boxing. And my UFC folks would come to me and they're like, dude, we got to go. I was like, are you kidding me? I don't even find this appealing. Like, you got to do it. It's great. It's everything that boxing has. But it's even more humane than boxing. I'm like, more humane? It looks barbaric. They're like, no, because boxing has a warrior mentality where you can't tap out, and this doesn't. So if you know you're beat, you save yourself from dying and you live another day. Whereas boxing, rather, you just get your ass kicked and you just get beaten into a pulp. And I remember saying that MMA didn't do anything for me because by this stage, and I think we're in the early 90s or whatever year it was the mid 90s. And I was like, at this stage in our lives, aren't we supposed to be more civilized? Aren't we supposed to be more evolved? And you want to actually you want me to adopt a blood sport into my life when we're supposed to be moving away from that? And guess what? We're animals. You're never getting away from the blood. You're never getting away from the sport of blood. And this is where I was like, I'm wrong about football. It's like people want to see this type of collision. And I was also thinking about it too, and if I'm really just going to go off the rails on this here, this is one of the reasons why, in addition to 9/11, it's one of the reasons why you have a lot of this military fetishizing, is that there are very few places in a modern society where you're allowed to just be physical. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if you yell at somebody, people look at you like you're a barbarian. There are very few places where you just get to go out and knock the shit out of somebody, right? It doesn't happen anymore.
Howard, do you watch this show on Amazon Prime called The Boys? It's based on a comic book.
Yes, my son was watching it 2 weeks ago, and I caught one of the episodes, and I was like, this is interesting, but no, not regularly. Yeah,
I would say definitely give it a try, given that your affinity for comic books, right? But the basic premise is superheroes, what they would actually be like. If viewing superheroes through a very cynical lens, that they'd all be narcissists and they would, take advantage of their celebrity to basically live the high life, right? And
they will become gods, corrupt gods.
Yes, and so one of the characters is named Homelander, and he's basically Superman.
And he's basically Donald Trump as well, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah. Well, as the show evolves, he becomes a sort of politicized character, a very right-leaning, yes, Trump is a great catch-all.
Yeah, I think whatever episode I was watching, I saw this and I'm like, oh, I see what this conceit of this is.
Right. So in it, there's a rally, and they're rallying kind of against this guy and against the superheroes.
Oh, is that the scene where he just blasts them all with his eye beams and kills them all?
Well, no. Well, that one was a fantasy that
was his dream sequence. Yeah,
that was a dream sequence. But in this last season, there's a rally, and he ends up just because someone's yelling and screaming, and he just kind of, to hell with this, blasts this person away. And there's that moment where everyone's like, yo, live on TV, this dude just murdered someone for talking. And it's a silence, and then there's one guy in the crowd who's like, yeah, and then the whole crowd cheers. And you realize everyone thought, oh, there's going to be a moment where this dude is going to snap at the wrong time. He's going to murder someone in front of everybody, and everyone's going to be like, this guy's a monster. Let's get rid of him. And instead, it rallied his base even harder. That's what the NFL is, my friend. Even if someone were, I'm sad to say this, because I like you thought something's gonna happen on a field one day, and everyone's gonna be like, what have we done? We've gone way too far. Let's all take a step back. And instead, I fear the opposite's gonna happen. People are gonna be like, yeah.
And we always end with the cheers, as we do on this show as well. This has been good, man. It's just the two of us. We'll have Kate next week, I believe. Right? I think.
Believe so, too.
We've got Kate Fagan back next week. For Meadowlarkers 42, I'm Howard Bryant. And we got Amin El Hassan as well. And we'll see you when we see you.